This episode of On the Beat is brought to you by Ingles. Shop online with Ingles Curbside Pickup. New curbside stores opening every week. Please welcome Mike Griffith.
Well, hey everybody, Mike Griffith here. Welcome to tonight's Ingles on the Beat show. And obviously a lot to talk about. Kirby Smart is named as starting quarterback. What does that mean? Some competition battles. Let's jump in really fast. On Ingles on the Beat show, we'll be joined by Chris Doering. Second half of the show, we'll get CD's take on the SEC and on the Georgia Bulldogs. So let's start out with Kirby naming Carson Beck the starter. Why? Experience. Kirby said, you know what? When things go sideways, when a player on his own team doesn't do the right thing, when the defense throws something at him, Carson Beck is the guy who has all the repetitions and all the experience and is the best suited to handle it. And that experience has put him atop the depth chart and will keep him there at least going into the opener. And Carson has waited his time. Let's be honest. This is a guy that's stuck around. We've written stories at DawgNation. Carson talking about, hey, there was a point I thought about transferring, but I stuck it out. Glad I did. And here he is now, finally going to get his chance, finally going to get that start versus UT Martin. And the way I look at it is like, this is Carson's job to keep. As long as he plays well and executes and shows that leadership and shows that he can handle the moment when things go sideways. Now, how quick will they go sideways? Kind of hard to tell when you look at that schedule. I think on the road against Auburn will be the big test to me, the final test. I think it'll be tested against South Carolina some, but I think on the road against Auburn will be, to me, the litmus test. Because Kirby said the number one most important thing is game action. We haven't seen it yet. Now, that is why Kirby said Vandegrift and Stockton are both going to get some reps with the ones the next couple weeks. And he didn't come right out and say it, but he's hinted that those guys are also going to play. Now, when are they going to play? What's the circumstance? When I asked that question at the press conference Saturday, Kirby said, we're not there yet. Haven't even gotten past first team. Don't know who the number two is, if there even is one. You just have two other capable guys that Kirby says he feels like Georgia can win games with. Now, let's move to running backs. Andrew Paul is gaining steam, and this is important. This is a guy who's now playing without a knee brace. He's 1 year out from the ACL. He's come back fast. And why is Andrew Paul so important, the freshman? Because I think of the backs, he might be the most multidimensional outside of Kendall, who's had this sporadic hamstring. You don't know what you're going to get from Kendall Milton. Once he gets back, you hope Milton's back for the long haul. But if he's not, you got to have a guy like Andrew Paul that can do so much out of the backfield. Yes, Dejon Edwards is talented, and he can do a lot of things as well. And I think they're counting on Dejon. But I think they like Andrew because of the versatility he brings out of the backfield. He's looked good in some of the scrimmages. I think this is a situation that's getting better. Branson Robinson doing everything but getting hit, Kirby says. So that is a good situation at the running back room, getting healthier, moving along, and even said Kendall Milton is gaining steam on the sidelines. So the running back room, some of those wrinkles starting to work themselves out. Cash Jones, obviously another multidimensional player back there. So I think the room will be fine. I don't know that it'll be the forte, maybe like it was in the past with James Cook and Kenny McIntosh and obviously what Zamir did between the tackles. We will see. That is a position group to keep an eye on. Now, offensive line, we know, maybe the best in the country, but the offensive line had I don't know if I'd call it a hiccup. I mean, look, Ernest Green had an ankle. He left the scrimmage. He went back in. They pulled him back out. Observation, you're projected starting left tackle. This is a guy who's extremely well coached. He's a giant. I met him out there at St. John Bosco a couple of years ago. Impressive young man. Wait until you hear Ernest Green talk football. This is an impressive guy. In fact, if you go on YouTube and search out, you might even be able to find that interview I did with him out at Bosco 2 years ago. I asked him about a lot of adult stuff, a lot of NIL questions, future questions, extremely well-spoken. I think he's going to be fine. Kirby said Xavier Truss got a little nicked up, but he's fine too. And Austin Blasky, who'd had some heat issues, he got some reps out there. So you got three different guys that can play left tackle, but that is a position that Georgia has circled like, all right, got to be good here. Like Kirby said, you do not want to be short of offensive tackles. Amarius Mims got right tackle locked down. This guy's first-round ability, man. I mean, I think so much of Amarius Mims. I think he's an absolute monster. I think he's going to be a perennial NFL starter. Obviously, you know about Cedric Van Pran. You know Ratledge is cooking right along, and Truss can play inside. Michael Morris, a guy, Dylan Fairchild. I mean, look, they're 8 deep. But that left tackle spot, you don't have Broderick Jones anymore, may have a little dip just because you had a top 10 talent over there. I think you're still going to be solid. Receiver position, now this is important. Let's group receivers and tight end. Lawson Lucky has the ankle, and he'll be out anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks, right? So you're pretty much primarily down healthy-wise to Delp and Bowers. This makes running double tight end less likely. So I think you're going to see more of the three wide set that we talked about with that slot receiver. And you hear so much about Dominic Lovick, and now you're hearing about McKee Muse. This is a guy that's impressed. I think you're going to see the walk-on out there. I think he's earned some attention and some touches, not just in the return game, but out of the slot. Got to be deep there. McConkey on the perimeter. Look, Ladd's a future NFL guy. I'm going to ask Doering about Ladd McConkey when I have him on. And then on the right side, you've got Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint and Ra Thomas. And Ra to me is kind of the unknown. We didn't really get to see him in the spring game. He obviously did a lot at Mississippi State, leading them in catches. But where does he fit in? How far along is he in the Georgia offense? So overall, I feel like this is a really solid offensive unit. Kirby says it's not where it's been the last 2 years. Well, you had Stetson Bennett there, and you even had JT Daniels there 2 years ago. You had a deeper and more experienced room. There is a talented room here, but there's not an experienced room. And that's going to come with the month of September. That's why all these people can say whatever they want about the Georgia schedule, but it is an absolute blessing because it's going to give your players opportunities to grow. And that's what needs to happen in the Georgia offense. Defensively, they're coming along. Maybe you don't have that train record defensive tackle, like Kirby said. Jalen Carter has moved on. But you know what? Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson, Zion Logue, these are guys that Kirby said will strike you. They will play the position properly. They're going to be effective. They're not going to be dominant like they were, but they're going to be effective and strong and certainly capable. And Georgia will do some other things to create the pass rush, right? Chaz Chambliss is an impressive, determined guy. Brock Bowers says he's the hardest guy on the team to block, right? And I was impressed with Jalen Walker. This is a guy that can play outside or inside. Keep an eye on Jalen Walker. This is a rising star. Kirby talks about him like he used to talk about Nakobe Dean. That's how I want you to think of Jalen Walker. That's the future of this guy. In the middle, JDJ is back. You heard him come out, make a public apology for the off-field transactions. This is a leader. This is the heartbeat of the team. This is the guy that has everyone's attention. So impressed with JDJ. And then next to him, you've seen Xavier Sori, get all these reps because Smile Munnen's been out. But Kirby says Smile's been running, gaining speed. I think Smile's going to be back in time for the stretch run, certainly if not the start of the year. But how beneficial is it that Sori's gotten these reps? Because you want that depth inside. Okay. Secondary, big battle at cornerback. Nyland Green, Dalen Everett working back there. Multiple guys competing for that spot opposite Kamari Lassiter. I think corner is going to be great. I think this could be the best secondary that Kirby's had. I know that's a mouthful, but I'm all in on Javon Bullard's switch to safety. I think he's going to be fantastic. I think you saw a preview of that when he was the defensive MVP of both of those CFP games last year. And then Malachi Starks is just one of these freaks. I mean, it's Malachi that makes the touchdown-saving tackle against Missouri. I remember talking to Ladd McConkey about the biggest plays of last year. He thinks that might have been the biggest play. I thought that was pretty fascinating insight from Ladd McConkey. But Malachi Starks, and don't forget Tyke Smith. Tyke was an All-American at West Virginia. He's going to be lined up in the star. Keep an eye on how they line up there. Janelle Aguero with a grade 1 hamstring, Kirby said. But this freshman is coming. I expect him to get back. I expect him to be an impact player. So overall, you can pick some spots where maybe Georgia's not as strong as they were a year ago, right? But I can pick some other spots where they're stronger. And then I look at the schedule and I say, you know what? The way Kirby plays these guys and builds depth, this is a team that's going to get better and better and better and better. And when they get to November, they're going to be stronger than they were in September, where most of these teams, when they lose their frontline guys, they don't have the championship depth that Georgia does. And that is the separator, right? When you get to the playoffs, which team has done the best job managing their talent? And that is Kirby Smart. That is what he does better than anyone in the country. He recruits great talent. He develops great talent. But most importantly, he manages that talent. And managing covers a lot of ground. Managing is getting the right guys in the right places. Managing is keeping guys in the locker room happy. Managing is a good high retention rate, not just for your coaching staff, but also for your players. Getting guys to come back that extra year. You think about, where did all this start? It all started with Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt coming back for their senior year in 2021. And that's what Georgia has going right now. Very exciting stuff. I want to go ahead and take a quick halftime break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by SEC Network star Chris Doering, former Florida Gator, for a long time held that all-time touchdowns receiving record. Only recently broken. CD hates when I introduce him like that. When we come back, we're going to be right back with Chris Doering. Stay with us. Listen to this message from our sponsor, Ingles.
Did you know that Ingles sells more organics than any other store? Or that they run their own dairy? Or that they only serve USDA choice and prime meat? Did you know that they have more local craft beer than any place else? Or that they have Energy Smart stores? Or that they professionally slice and package imported cheese from Europe? Did you know about their giant international aisle, local farm partnerships, curbside pickup, wine department? Or that they donate 3,956 meals a day to local food banks? Well, now you do. It's all in the bag. Ingles, low prices, love the savings.
Well, welcome back to the show. And as promised, now Chris Doering has joined as former Florida Gator. And Chris, I really appreciate you joining the program tonight to talk a little college football. Hope you've had a great summer. Let's start right out of the gate. When I say Georgia football, three-peat, give me some feedback. What goes through your mind?
That's my pick. I mean, they're the gold standard of college football right now. So I'm really impressed with not only what Kirby Smart has built there, but the ability to sustain the fact that they've been able to keep their roster largely intact the last couple of years when we see so much movement in other schools around the country. The fact that he's got the guys understanding to have patience and the role that they play on a team until their opportunity presents itself, and just the team atmosphere. When you have so many guys that are that highly recruited players that think they're entitled to playing time early on, for these guys to really get it, to buy in and to understand they're going to come to Georgia and have a chance to win a championship. They're going to have a chance to develop into great players. And they're going to have a chance to get drafted early in the NFL draft. It's a pretty good proposition. And Kirby Smart has this thing rolling right now.
All right, before we dig in a little bit, I had Peter Burns on last week. Now, you're the other half of this equation. I know people have seen the bets, the LSU Florida bets. You've dressed up as Mr. Peanut. You had to wear an LSU baseball uniform on a flight. What I'm trying to think other what were some of the other
a clown, a yodeler. I was Lion King or Tiger King, whatever that dude's name was from the pandemic year. So it's been a wide range of bets that I've had to pay up on the losing end, man.
Now how do you roll with this, Chris? Because so many people on TV take themselves seriously. And yet you're good with, at least you seem to be good with this. You seem to be good with this act, but I'm thinking at some point, Chris has got to think at some point you got to win one of these bets, and Pete's got to dress up, right?
Well, that's the thing, man. It's like I'm watching the roulette wheel come up black every single time, and I'm like, all right, I'm going red again. Sooner or later, it's going to be red, and it just hasn't hit red yet. But I believe that it will. In fact, I saw Coach Napier at SEC Media Days. First thing he said when he saw me was, "Hey, Chris, we got to get you off the losing streak here, man. We got to get you a win against that Peter Burns guy." So I'm confident that he's keeping me in the back of his mind when they go to Death Valley this year. Florida's going to be a big underdog, but maybe they can find a way to pull it off.
Now, you're known for all the winning that you did as part of Coach Spurrier's program, and now obviously, you've got the Steve Spurrier Coach of the Year award. You and I work along with. I'm not going to take the program too off the rails for our Georgia audience, but I always thought it was pretty insightful. When we would see Florida show up, and it just seemed like fun and gun and swag. But you told me that behind the scenes on those Spurrier teams, there was a lot of work that got put in. Could you kind of capture what went on behind the scenes? Because all everybody saw was fun and gun on Saturdays. You said there was a lot more to it than that.
Well, first and foremost, all the Georgia folks that are listening to this really can be thanked for a lot of the success that we had during the 90s, because the first thing that Coach Spurrier mentioned when he got here was we need to find a way to beat Georgia. Georgia had dominated that series during the 80s and really prevented Florida more times than not. When they had a chance to win their first official SEC championship, Georgia would find a way to spoil it. And so winning that game became the impetus of getting to the rest of the goals that we had on our list. And so we found a way to have a great run. I went 5-0 during my 5 years there, but it really is one of the favorite college football rivalries in the whole landscape of football. Just the pageantry and history and tradition, such a great rivalry. But I'd say in general, the thing that people didn't see with the time that we spent, just routes on air. I mean, quarterbacks and receivers going over and over again, quarterback taking the steps, throwing to the right place, receivers getting in and out of their break, being at the right depth where they're supposed to be. We made it look really easy. We had a compilation of players that executed really well, but there was a lot of work that went into having it look as smoothly as it did on Saturdays.
Now, Chris, this is where I want to take this because Coach Spurrier wasn't afraid to play more than one quarterback. And obviously, you were a very gifted receiver, went on and played in the NFL as well as holding that record in the SEC for years and years and years and years. Now that Georgia has Carson, they've named him starter, but Kirby says Vandegrift and Stockton are going to continue to get 1 reps. He said he believes he can win with all 3. How does that shake out behind the scenes when you're a receiver and you're working with multiple quarterbacks? And how do you see that playing out in Mike Bobo and Georgia managing that?
Yeah, I played in a period of time where Terry Dean and Danny Warfel kind of were going back and forth for a couple of years there. And a lot of what I did were routes that were better suited probably when Danny was in there. Some of the throws that he made a little better, some of the corners and posts that he threw. So when Danny was in, I was catching a little bit more of the passes. When Terry was in, guys like Jack Jackson were maybe getting a little bit more of the deeper throws. But there's certainly a rhythm and a rapport that's developed with a starting quarterback and his receivers. That's why it's so important to get a guy named during camp to get those snaps with the ones, not only at the receiver position, but the center quarterback exchange. That's so important. The handoffs from quarterbacks to the running backs. But I do think, Coach Spurrier always said, he used that John Woodenism, the coach's greatest ally is the bench, and competition is what Kirby Smart has built that program there in Athens on. And for so many years, coaches treated the quarterback position different than everybody else. But Coach Spurrier was not afraid. If a guy wasn't playing up to the standards of his expectation, he put another guy in. And more times than not, it allowed the guy that was on a break to get a different view and catch his breath and get back in there. So it's not one of the things that it doomed you. You get. He did it to us as a receiver. I'd gotten benched, throughout my time and got a chance to earn my way back in there. And quarterback is no different in Coach Spurrier's mind. I think Coach Smart would probably feel the same way.
Yeah, they both wear visors. They played a little golf together last summer. Fans do not want to think about Steve Spurrier and Kirby Smart being allies, but there is a mutual respect there.
I'll say this, Mike. I had a chance to be with Coach Spurrier this offseason, and he spoke really highly of Coach Smart, how much he likes Kirby, and that's high praise. Coach Spurrier is one of the Mount Rushmore of coaches in the SEC, and for him to speak the way he does about Kirby Smart, certainly it's a great endorsement.
Yeah, he doesn't sprinkle compliments that often. He really does, and he's got a very high standard, and a lot of fun though. Always fun talking with Coach. I saw somebody said, "Oh, Coach Spurrier took a shot at Georgia's schedule." I said, no, he didn't. They asked him about the schedule, and Florida's playing Utah, and Georgia's playing UT Martin. I mean, what is there to say? That's not taking a shot. That's just pointing out that one team opens against a softer schedule. And I said before you got on, listen, Georgia's played Oregon in the opener. They played Clemson in the opener. They played 2, Power 5 teams for years and years and years, Chris. They don't have to apologize because Oklahoma game falls out. But I really believe this schedule is conducive when you look at what Kirby and Georgia are trying to accomplish. I mean, they've reloaded once after losing 15 guys. Now they've lost 10. I guess I would ask you where you think they are, in proportion to maybe an LSU or an Alabama in the SEC race.
I was shocked to see the Football Power Index have both Ohio State and Alabama with better chances of winning a national championship than what Georgia does, especially after maybe it has something to do with history and nobody three-peating since the 30s when Minnesota did it. But to me, he's shown the ability to reload defensively. When they've lost first-round guys, they've had the next guy step right up. Certainly, he has shown the ability to keep them hungry, which they stayed hungry last year and went undefeated. But the thing to me, like Mike, when I look at Alabama, I dock them because they got a new offensive coordinator. I dock them because they got a new quarterback. But when I look at Georgia, it's the same scenario, and I don't hit Georgia the same way. And I think that has a lot to do with what Georgia's shown me the last couple of years. And I also think it has a lot to do with the pieces surrounding the quarterback. Alabama has been largely disappointing on the offensive line and at the wide receiver position. And last year, Bryce Young was rescuing both of those position groups, whether it was a guy coming free, making him miss and scrambling for a first down, or a receiver dropping the ball on third down and Bryce Young patting him on the back, trying to pick him up. Georgia does not have that problem. Georgia's got the best offensive line in the conference and maybe one of the best in the country. And they have a group of receivers like they've never had before. And that obviously is in complement to what they have at the tight end position. But I'm just thrilled to watch this Georgia wide receiving core. As a fan of the wide receiver position, what I've heard about, what Dominic Lovett's done since coming over, and obviously being a compliment to Ladd McConkey, what he did last year. I think the pieces around are going to help Carson Beck acclimate a little bit easier than what Alabama will.
I wanted to ask you about Ladd. I mean, because the comparison's hard not to make. I mean, you started out as a walk-on, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you came to games, you were Ladd wasn't a walk-on, but he was a 3-star. And I'm trying to think who his other offers were, like Army, FCS schools. Redshirted his first year. I think the first game he even dressed for was at Missouri at the end of the year, and he didn't even get in. What have you seen from Ladd McConkey, and is that a guy that you've kind of taken a liking to because of the story and the growth, and much like what you did at Florida?
I love the underdog story. I love guys proving people wrong. My whole high school career and on to the beginning of college was people telling me what I couldn't do. I think there's a lot of people that looked at Ladd McConkey and said, well, he doesn't look like a typical SEC wide receiver. But what a compliment, though, to, there's a lot of coaches that recruit to the rankings. And for Kirby Smart and his staff to understand, hey, there's something special about Ladd McConkey here. He may not appeal to every coaching staff out there, but what we're looking for at the wide receiver position, what he brings in terms of intangibles, is exactly what we want. And sometimes I can tell you this, Mike, I've been around guys that were 5-star blue chip, can't miss prospects that came in and believed all the headlines and never had to work to earn anything and never became what they probably could have. And then I've been around guys that were the underdogs that have had to constantly use that chip on their shoulder to prove people wrong. And I feel like Ladd is that guy. And let's be honest, there were periods of time last year where he wasn't very good. He dropped multiple passes in tough situations. He fumbled a couple times on punt returns. But that makeup of, hey, I'm going to move on to the next play. I'm going to come back and prove people wrong. By the end of the year, he was rolling. And Stetson certainly knew who to depend on in third down in crucial situations.
Yeah, no doubt. Ladd had to play through some injuries. I think it got in his head. You've been there, you've done that.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a step for a player to learn how to play through and keep that focus. And certainly Ladd made it through that little valley. And really, when he's on his game, I know this is way too much hype, but in the open field, man, I think he's McCaffrey-like. I think in the open field, this guy has got some juice, breaks tackles. I think he's an absolute star. A lot of questions that people are asking really aren't about Georgia. Now, Georgia's kind of reached that point where, to a degree, we all kind of go, yeah, Kirby's got this, even though they got to replace this and they got to replace that. We say, well, but who's out there? Like, who is out there? When you look at the SEC Eastern Division and you look at Georgia's schedule, and obviously they play at Tennessee November 18th, but Kentucky and Missouri and Florida, like, how do you see the East lining up, and where are some of the threats for the Bulldogs?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think it's Georgia and everybody else. And that's not just in the East. That's in the conference in general. I think there's a pretty significant gap between where Georgia – I think LSU probably wins the West, but I think they're still a step or two behind where Georgia is. Alabama, to me, is a team that I think wins 9 games this year. I'm not buying the hype on them winning a division or even an SEC championship next year. I just have too many questions about those positions that I mentioned earlier, the offensive line and receiver, not to mention where they seem to be with the quarterback position. But I think, for me, the East is like this jumbled up group of teams that 4 or 5 different teams in there. Last year, it was Tennessee and South Carolina feasting on those other East teams where they could take a step forward. Kentucky took a step back. I think Kentucky is a really under-talked about team. Liam Cohen returning to Lexington is a huge get for them. Getting Devin Leary to come over from NC State is maybe one of the most underrated, talked about transfer portal acquisitions. I love their defense. Brad White is an absolute stud on that side of the ball. So I think they get back to playing better on the offensive line. And I think they are a team that can take a step forward. I have them finishing second in the East. I think Tennessee takes a little bit of a step back this year. I think South Carolina may take a little bit of a step back as well. Florida's not quite where they're ready to really assert themselves given the difficult nature of their schedule. And honestly, you know this better than I do, that Missouri team, the Missouri defense, the front seven, outside of Georgia's front seven, I think Missouri's front seven may be the second most physical defensive front in the East. And, I'm interested to see how Brady Cook and Sam Horn are able to kind of, take that quarterback position and run with it. They could be a little bit of a dark horse in the East this year.
Yeah, we really never know about Missouri. They're always that team. You really just never know what you're going to get. I mean, they can knock anybody off, and they can obviously lose to anybody. Chris, before I let you go, I want to gain a little bit of insight because I watched the studio show that you do, and I really enjoy that. I think a lot of the people watching, watch the SEC Network and like the compilation show at the end of the night when you guys are sitting around or have.
Yeah.
What is your day like on a Saturday? Do you fly up the night before? Tell me how that weekend works for you with the SEC Network.
Mikey, I fly up there on Thursday, and I don't go home until Monday afternoon. So during the season, I got 4 nights in Charlotte, 3 nights in my own bed, and it can certainly become a little challenging and a little fatiguing. But I get to do something I love and cover in the conference that I know best. I get to work with people that I have such a great time doing that. Friday morning, PB and I kind of kick the weekend off with SEC this morning, and then I do the Friday night preview show with Dory, and then Saturday it's 12 or 13 hours in the studio. We get in there around noon. We have our triple header where we're doing halftime, post-game, pregame, halftime, post-game, pregame, halftime, and then the wrap show at the end of the night. So it's a marathon. By the time we get to, around 11:15, when the last game's finishing up, you got to find a way to dig down and get that energy and make sure you can represent well. Because that show not only is live when the end of the night finishes up, but it's all night long. It's all the next day. I think we're the highest rated show on the network, and so it's kind of a destination show for a lot of SEC fans after they get home from the ballpark, and that's it's an honor for me to be on there and have that be part of everybody's routine on Saturdays during the fall.
Well, I appreciate you squeezing us in. I know you work out. Now, do you get workouts in when you're in? People don't know this about Chris. If they see him in person, they get it. But he's like a workout warrior, right? Like Tebow wears it with the shoulders and the muscles. Chris is just that in-shape guy. He goes, I want to be that thin. How often do you get workouts in Charlotte? Is that still part of the regimen for you?
It is. It's been a little challenging, but I stay in a hotel right next door. There's a yoga studio. So on Fridays after the morning show, I go to a little hot yoga. There's also an Orange Theory there that I'll go grab a workout in. Alyssa Lang's been kind enough to put me under her wing, and we get a workout in when I'm up there, and then hitting some runs on my own, man. I definitely miss my workout crew in Gainesville, but trying to find a way to not fall into the doldrums of traveling, eating bad, and skipping workouts, man.
It doesn't just happen. Chris, thank you so much for joining us, and thank everyone for joining us tonight on the Ingles on the Beat show. And if you got any questions, comments, throw them on the screen. I love reading the comments. I go back, I answer them. You can hit me on Twitter at Mike Griffith 32. And of course, you'll see Chris Doering every Saturday on the SEC Network. You'll see him Friday. Still doing the Sirius XM radio too, right?
Yeah, I got the Sirius XM radio year round. We got our simulcast on the SEC Network starting that first Friday after the Thursday night opener, and then we open the weekend with that show and we close it with the Monday morning simulcast on the SEC Network. So it's a lot of programming over that 4-day span, but it's a lot of fun, man.
Great stuff. Chris Doering, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget Connor Riley on Sunday nights, Connor in coverage, Jeff Santel Wednesday nights before the hedges every day, Brandon Adams, DawgNation Daily, and now our Thursday night Tailgater show with Kaylee Manziel. You want to check that out, 7 p.m. on our DawgNation's channels. Have a great week, everybody.